Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Welcome, everyone, for the nationally recognized Legacy Leaders Podcast. And we're really excited today to have with us Chris, or as his dad calls him, Christopher DeWolfe. And just introduce yourself, Chris, and then I'm going to ask you some questions, if that's okay.
Sure. Jamie, again, my name is Chris, or Christopher DeWolfe, and I am a managing investment advisor in a boutique investment planning firm in Birmingham, Michigan. And Jamie and I got to know each other here recently over conversation and was gracious enough to invite me in on this podcast today.
Oh, cool. So you did a little bit before, Chris, but tell me a little bit about your backstory. I'd love to hear the backstory.
Sure. When it all happened and how I got here, sure, I'd love to share that with you. So I went to school out in your area at Grand Valley State University. I graduated in 1995 with a business degree and followed along the footsteps of my father, also named Christopher DeWolfe, who's a retired investment advisor with the Bank of Montreal in Canada. So I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, and when it was time to go to college, I went to Grand Valley State University, and then shortly thereafter, I got my resume together and started trying to find out where I was going to land in work. I started looking in Chicago area and shortly recognized that Chicago was a lot more expensive for a kid coming out of college, and landed here in Troy, Michigan with, at the time, it was called Dean Witter, which shortly thereafter got bought out by Morgan Stanley and became Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. And I think they just shortened up the name to Morgan Stanley after that. It was 1999. So I was already in the business for 4 years. And in 1999, my business partner, Jason Franklin, still my business partner today, he and I were in the same training class at Dean Witter. And became good friends and decided to start doing some workshops down in the Dearborn area for Ford Motor employees on your basics, your retirement planning basics. And in 1999, we decided to take at the time was a pretty risky move. According to a lot of the senior advisors at Dean Witter, they thought we were crazy for doing this at such a young age and so early into the business. But we went independent in 1999 and founded our company today, the Investment Consulting Group. And looking back on it, it was probably, I know it was a scary decision at the time, and we were told it was a scary decision, but it was the best decision we ever made.
Wow. So would you say one of the reasons why you became an advisor was the influence of your dad, or then did you find in school you were led to it? And are you bilingual? Do you speak voulez-vous avec moi, chez moi?
I do not, Jamie. I have some friends that still reside in Windsor that went to French schools and are very good at it. We were fortunate enough to go to Quebec City here earlier this year with the family and do some skiing. And I was worried that none of us were fluent in French, but it was no problem. It was a big tourist spot and everybody spoke English. But yeah, so rewind a little bit on that. I went to school. I was good at math and some of the sciences, and my early love for studies kind of focused in on architecture.
Oh, wow.
I initially wanted to be an architect. I think somewhere along the way, I fell back onto being interested in what my father did and certainly followed his footsteps.
So probably the influence of your own education and your dad, and then landing that job with your friend, was that kind of the combination of that? And you said, this is it? Or did it take you a while to really jump in the pond?
No, I think, again, somewhere along the way, and it might have been maybe some of the higher levels of math that were required to get into the field of architecture. Maybe I just decided on my own, kind of shifted gears, and I really liked what my father did. I asked him a lot of questions along the way. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget this. He sort of discouraged me from getting into this line of work. I think what his reasoning behind was just to make sure that's truly what I really wanted to do and what I was going to think I loved to do.
Good for him. Yeah.
Any good parent would do,
Yep.
just to make sure that was it. And yeah, I kept telling him, yeah, this is exactly what I want to do. And he was a great mentor, even though he was in a different country, different rules and regulations surrounding our businesses. He was still able to help me out quite a bit, outside of the corporation that I was working with at the time.
Then obviously you had to put the other oar in the water, which is it's a people business, people, and the brilliance of doing what you do is amazing. I don't know how you guys keep up with what you do. It's amazing to me. But then the people side is part of it. So based on that, what would you say is the main thing that you've learned through the work that you do?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jamie. It is definitely a people business. It's a service business. Today, a lot has evolved since I got in the business 25 years ago. I'll never forget this. I didn't have a cell phone initially when I got into the business. I didn't have a computer. I had a telephone. And so we've come a long ways, right? And one thing that was constant throughout the process, I think, even though back in the day it might have been a lot more salesy, product of the month or whatever Morgan Stanley, Dean Witter mutual fund of the month was, they would, sales type programs. But one thing that stayed constant was, it's about developing a relationship with the individual who's looking for the advice from our field.
Yes.
And I have clients that to this day are some of my very first clients.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and it's been great. I think in the beginning, as a young investment advisor, you pretty well had to grab any sort of line of any sort of business or any sort of personality along the way, right? Just to survive, right? But somewhere along the way, it was nice to try to take a look at the relationships I was working with, and at the time, the vast majority of them were solid, enjoyable, on the same page relationships. And I think that holds true today. I mean, every single one of my clients, I enjoy talking to on the phone. I enjoy meeting them and talking about, we talk a lot about other things other than just the business part of it. How are their families going? What are they doing in retirement? How are they spending this money? So it's interesting. I enjoy that part of it.
Yeah, we actually, at the front end of our estate planning practice, we handed out with our introduction packet, and it's a little 8-question flyer that says, who is an ideal client for us? And it always cracks people up because I tell them, oh, you only have to get a D plus to pass. And some of them, the smart ones, will go, well, geez, Jamie, there's 8 questions and you didn't ask me one question about my money. It was all relationship stuff. So that's how we kind of do it, other than just do it. What would you say is an ideal, if it's fair for me to ask you to define it on the spot, what would you say is an ideal client for you?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of people have a lot of different ways of going about our business. And you'll hear this quite a bit that certain firms will have, minimum dollar amounts to work with the company. And I've sort of, not subscribed to that. You have to have a minimum. Yeah, granted, we all want to have good relationships first. And certainly, higher net worth individuals tend to be quote unquote better clients than some of your smaller investors. But we have one motto here, and that's we are willing to help out anybody, big, small, or in between, that is truly looking for investment advice. And hopefully we can provide some investment advice or planning advice to them, whether it's here in-house or we, refer them somewhere else. So
Well, that's wonderful to have that broad brush. We do the same thing. We don't charge. Just come on in. Let's talk. If we can help you, great. If not, great. It's all great.
Yeah, I think the important part is to determine if there's a fit. I mean, again, you know this, Jamie. There's lots of personalities out there. And, it's really important to make sure that you enjoy working with that individual or that colleague because it's less stressful, right? If you're always thinking
for them
about,
as well.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. So how do folks find you, Chris? What do you find? Oh, you say the industry has changed. Oh my gosh. When I started back in Old Testament days, we had a 5-cent postcard that gave away a Rand McNally road atlas. That was the whole industry. And now you guys have to have 9 gazillion hours of CE and keep up with the markets. It's just incredible. So how do folks find you now? And what would you say was a common misconception you face? We have two that we face as lawyers. What are the two that you face when I come in and I say something, you go, man, that's what a lot of people say, but the truth is, etc.
right. Okay. Well, yeah. So again, how businesses evolve. When I got in the business, I certainly didn't have the platforms that I have to work with today to try to promote the company and promote our services and see if there are any, newer clients that would be a good fit. I started off working out of a Yellow Pages. I mean, I'm sure there's some viewers that don't even know what a phone book is today, but yes, I would call local businesses and try to establish some sort of rapport with them. And that was my main focus at the time. Today, and I'll let you know that, this is the first podcast I've ever done. And thank you for inviting me in on it. Yeah, but this is one example of, some of the things that are available to everybody nowadays to help, scale their businesses.
Yes, amen.
Yeah. So, we're on social media quite a bit. We do a lot of, LinkedIn, obviously being a big platform for businesses. I'm not too much of a Facebook guy or Instagram guy. I'm on technology enough during the course of the day that when I go home at night, I'd rather, hang out with the family and have conversation, although that's challenging for the youngsters too, right? Like they like to be on their phones all the time too. So that part of it's a little challenging, but yeah, so the platforms that we have available today, including this podcast, I think are great ways to introduce yourself in your services that you're providing. And again, there's obviously after that, there's a conversation with a potential client. And if there is a good fit, then you can continue to have the conversation.
Yeah, they're calling some of the younger generation, and I mean this as a joke, not disparagement, but they're calling them screen agers.
Screen agers.
Screen agers. So I get it. And I tell my grandkids, hey, you want to call me or come see me? Great. But Grandpa doesn't Twitter, tweet, or toot, or Facebook, or backface, or up your nose, or whatever. It's called people and a conversation.
That's right.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, let me tell you a quick story here. This past weekend, we were in Indiana for my son plays travel baseball. My daughter plays travel softball. So I took my son to Indiana, big tournament there. And we went out to dinner as a team afterwards. And one of the fathers grabbed all of the boys' phones from the dinner.
Oh, cool.
Grabbed all the phones and walked them over to the parents' table and put them all in the middle and said, there you go.
Awesome.
Have conversation, have fun, eat. And I thought that was very cool because I don't think they get enough of that and they don't understand. But yeah,
man, I'm stealing that. Thanks for the idea. Awesome.
Yeah. Hey, it's always good to have balance. We tell everybody in our business, to talk about investment portfolios, which I'll get to because you talked about misconceptions in our business. But, everything's about balance in life. Right? If you go one way too far or go the other way too far, I don't think that's a good recipe for life in itself.
But you can teach what to balance about. So
absolutely,
one of the best football coaches in the entire country, in the locker room, as the players walked in, there was a 3-foot fluorescent blue line on the floor. I mean, it was so bright you had to cover your eyes. And when they walked in, he coach them, when you walk across this line, you forget girlfriends and studies and grades and bills, and you're here to one reason, to play football. But then when practice is over and you leave and you cross back out, then girlfriend, studies. So you can teach yourself what to focus on. I guess as an aside, Chase a Rabbit here, a book I would recommend to everyone listening to this podcast is called Deep Work. Deep Work. And after working my way through that book, the process I've developed is at 5:01 every day, I shut down. And I say to myself, shut down, complete. And I've kind of taught people that. They know if you want to get a hold of me, if it's important, you got to do it because I'm going to do my thing at that point. So would you mind sharing with us kind of good news, bad news? Give us a story on something that went really good for a client and something that kind of went not so good. And for sure, I forgot to ask you, or I should ask you, what's the best way? How do we find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so again, we're here in Birmingham, Michigan. That's our main office, but we do have remote locations in Novi, Michigan, Dearborn, Michigan, and my business partner, who I mentioned earlier, lives and resides in Franklin, Tennessee. So we do have a office in Franklin, Tennessee as well. But
Yeehaw!
yeah, we could, people could get a hold of us via LinkedIn, via phone, via email. We have a recently updated website that I think is a little bit more current nowadays. So that's a useful tool as well.
Would you mind spelling or give us the name, please?
It's very easy. It's so THEICG.com. And the ICG stands for Investment Consulting Group.
Wow, even I can understand that. Thanks. That's awesome.
It's pretty easy.
So tell me about something that went really well for a client and something where you went, oh my God, they could have prevented all that. I mean, obviously, as an attorney, we have a ton of the bad news, what went wrong, the crappy probate and the dysfunction, and why are we paying Darth Vader, the IRS, these taxes and yada, yada. But what about from your seat on the bus?
Sure. Well, you probably heard this before, but the financial markets or individual securities are, driven by fear and greed, right? So, there is the greed aspect of it in the investment world. Everybody wants to make money. And, to be honest, there's no easy way of going about it. It's not trying to get lucky here. But there's been plenty of stories, and these have been stories that I've heard from prospective clients that have come to us, where they put too many eggs in one basket. And unfortunately, that affected, their total portfolio. So they weren't weighted or balanced correctly. And they put too much risk in something that they thought was going to be a great thing for them. And it ended up being not such a great thing for them. So again, back to that balance, we have a rule of thumb that, many people who work for major corporations do get company stock, and they're able to buy that company stock in their 401k plans. And they have, employee stock options or restricted share units that are awarded to them. We always have a rule of thumb, never have more than 20% of your portfolio in any one security. And I don't care.
Awesome.
I don't care if it's Amazon or, some of the premier companies out there. I think that's a good rule to live by, because there's always ifs, if something does happen where Amazon is not a big player in in its industry, and that individual loses a lot of wealth, you don't want it to disrupt everything else.
Amen. So the two guys are talking, and say, I heard your grandpa is a multi-millionaire, Bob. He said, yeah, he is. So how did he do it? What's the secret? Oh, pretty easy. He bought General Electric stock when it was General Candle.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there was a lot less companies back in prior generations too, right? So, but now we have, public companies are all over the place. So I think that would be one, certainly a lesson that we'll continue to hear, but we've certainly heard a number of stories in the past. And the thing is, you don't want it to, as an investor who's looking to have some sort of post-career plans like a retirement, where they're able to do the fun things that they want to do without having to go into work and and so forth. Those things take money to do, and you don't want to disrupt those plans.
What would you say your biggest challenges as a wealth manager and a financial advisor?
The biggest challenge, that's a great question. Probably the toughest question that we've addressed today. But what is the biggest challenge? With all of the tools that we have today, Jamie, we have a wealth management planning software program that we use. It's owned by Fidelity. It's called eMoney. It answers a lot of questions for us and for our clients. So I'm not certain if there's any challenge with having such software. And there's other good competing software out there. But with this software, I don't think there's anything that we cannot answer for a client today from a financial aspect. I think the challenge, again, I'm stumped on that, Jamie. I'm not sure what the challenge is.
Well, would it be similar? Our biggest challenge is people just wait and wait and wait. Well, I'll get around to it. I'll get around to it. I know I'm supposed to, I got to have advice. Yep, okay. I know I'm supposed to take care of my family. Yep, I don't want to pay. Yep. Every time they come in, they say the same questions. It's always the same answer. Do you want to leave any money to judges and lawyers? No. You want to leave any money to the IRS? No. Well, how come you didn't come in, George? Well, we just got it. And they finally do, and they go, why didn't I do this earlier? Do you find the same thing once they kind of get in? They go, gosh, this is wonderful.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I definitely think that people think that they have more time when they really don't have enough time. In some cases.
Amen.
So we will talk to prospective clients day in and day out. And one of the common things that we hear over the phone is that, would you like to have some sort of initial conversation and get to know, some of the services that we provide? And we'd love to get to know, what your situation is. And one of the common rebuttals would be, well, I'm not retiring for another 5 years. Right? So, 5 years isn't a long period of time, as you well know. So some people think that they don't need to plan until they get to that event. And much like your line of work, you need to do the planning before that event happens, not after, because afterwards it's a mess, isn't it? Right?
Yes.
It can be very time consuming, costly, and so forth. So
we
encourage planning early. You've heard it before, but the earlier the better. It's the eighth wonder of the world, right? The miracle of compounding of money. So if you have a young individual who I think that those generations I don't think they have as good of a setup as some of the later generations today, because more of it's on them, right? There's not defined pension plans that are available to the young worker today, right? They have to do this on their own. And the earlier they start, the better off it's going to be.
Wasn't it? My mind's telling me it was Einstein that said compounding fascinated him more than theory of relativity. He couldn't understand it. It just worked.
Yeah,
right?
It's an amazing thing, but the key variable there is the time aspect of it.
And the timeline, do you find, as we do with our business owners, one of our niches in our practice is exit planning for business owners. And so you're playing golf with George. Hey, George, what do you think about leaving your company? Wow, I was thinking about 5 years. 5 years, okay. 5 years goes by. Hey, George, yeah, I was thinking 5. We call it perma 5. Instead of saying the sooner I get started, the better result I'm going to have. That's our biggest challenge. Is it similar for you?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, it's an easy thing to procrastinate on, especially in your line of work, Jamie, when you're talking about an event that involves death. Nobody really wants to, really talk about that. What's going to happen? It's an event that's not, we tend to put those off, right? And the same thing with the advising world is that people they would rather go about their day to day. And as they do, those days continue to add up. It's just not something that is high on their priority list.
Until something bad happens, right?
Well, yeah, when they get to that retirement age, I'm not retiring for another 5 years, and all of a sudden 5 years go by, and then you find out that you can't retire. How good of a plan was that?
So as we get close to the end here, I have two kind of esoteric, weird questions for you that are on my mind personally.
Okay.
One of them is Cliff Notes 30 seconds on cryptocurrency. And then just not a political question. Republican, Democrat, Independent. I'm not into labels.
Right.
I hate labels. The idea is, as we're elections coming up in a short time and we're getting ready to vote, I have criteria based on the impact it's going to have on my clients, taxes and asset protection and like that. So in a minute or so here, sorry for the short fuse, but could you give us your best advice on crypto? And then as we're approaching the election, what type of values do we look for when we're going to vote for someone?
Okay. So to the crypto end of things, obviously it's a investment category out there today that people do invest in, and it had a very nice run up in the very beginning, and it sold off quite a bit there more recently over the last few years, and it's starting to make a little bit of a recovery again. I think it's an arena that is here to stay. I don't know enough about it to get into the ins and outs of crypto, but my best advice for those people that are looking to invest in cryptocurrency, go back to the rule of thumb that I talked about earlier about company stock. Don't put too much into a speculative category like that. If you have, for instance, a couple years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I decided to put $5,000 into Bitcoin. So I went on an app, Coinbase, I think was the app, and I bought $5,000 worth of Bitcoin. But when I did that, I figured, you know what, if that $5,000 doesn't amount to anything, as a matter of fact, it loses everything, I'm okay with it. So that's how I would treat the crypto. I do have a friend who is licensed in cryptocurrency, who knows a lot more about it if somebody's looking to invest on a more in a bigger way. And,
sure.
I've got that sort of resource, but I personally don't. That would be my advice, is to limit it.
Okay.
The other question you had was about the election. We are in an election year, right? So I do know, based upon past elections, that my conversations with clients, and I host meetings with my clients on a regular basis. So, I'm in the middle of it right now this month, and then I'll take a little breather next month and gear up for the next quarter. But a lot of conversations will be ramping up, and we will be talking about politics, good or bad. It's there, right? So your question is how does it relate to the markets, or how does it?
If it's a re-election or a new election, I try to find out information on how did they vote about tax issues and asset protection and that kind of stuff. So,
sure.
Well, I'm so happy to have had you with us today, Chris. It's been enlightening to me and lots of fun. So once again, I'm with Chris DeWolfe, managing partner and wealth manager for the investment consulting group. They're in Birmingham. We would encourage you to reach out with your questions, and you can always get a hold of us here at the law firm. And thanks for listening to Legacy Leaders. And don't forget our monthly webinar coming up. So God bless everybody. Have a terrific day. You absolutely deserve it.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.